The baby shower was supposed to be a joyful moment, but it turned into humiliation. When my cousin asked why my eyes looked red, I explained that I had thrown up so hard that small blood vessels burst. My boyfriend David immediately snapped. "Shut up. Nobody wants to hear about your vomiting and bloody eyes. It's revolting. Can't you be pregnant without making it everyone's problem?" The entire room went silent. Even his sister tried to stop him, but David continued complaining about me, mentioning swollen feet, leaking breasts, or anything else related to pregnancy. He declared that I was ruining the party by disgusting people. His mother gasped, reminding him that I was carrying his child, but it didn't matter. I put down my drink and looked straight at him. "You're right, David. I won't burden you with any more updates." He smiled smugly, thinking he had won. 2 days later, I was getting ready for my anatomy scan. When David asked what time he should drive me, I calmly replied, "I'm going alone. I don't want to disgust you with medical details." He protested, wanting to know the gender, but I reminded him that ultrasounds involve gross procedures he had rejected. From then on, I made a quiet decision. David would no longer be part of my pregnancy journey. I discussed baby names with friends and family, but never with him. When asked why, I simply repeated his own words that pregnancy details were too unpleasant for him. It was the moment I realized protecting myself and my child meant setting boundaries, even if it meant shutting out the man who should have been my partner. At 28 weeks, my body began sending alarming signals. My feet swelled so much that pressing them left deep marks and dark spots clouded my vision. I went to the hospital alone, unwilling to call David. The doctors diagnosed preeclampsia and admitted me for monitoring. I texted family and friends, but not him. He eventually found out only when his brother called asking why he wasn't at the hospital. When David confronted me, I reminded him, "Pregnancy details are disgusting to you. Why would I expose you to them now?" His silence was answer enough. When doctors scheduled a C-section for 36 weeks, I again informed everyone except David. It was his sister who finally told him, and he called me frantically. "You're having our son on Tuesday." "I need to be there," I responded coolly. "Why surgery involves blood, amniotic fluid, and organs? Exactly the things you said you couldn't stand." The morning of the operation, I ordered an Uber while David was in the shower. Just before anesthesia, I sent him a text, "Having the baby now. Don't want to disgust you with details." When I woke in recovery, he was already in the room, pale and furious. "You didn't tell me you were leaving. I missed my son's first moments." I looked at him calmly. "I protected you from what you called revolting." The nurse, aware of the situation, gave him a cold glance. "So you're the one who thinks pregnancy is gross?" "First father, we've seen who didn't want updates." David stood frozen then, without a word, walked out the door, slamming behind him. I lay there aching from the incisions, staring at the empty doorway. 20 minutes later, a nurse placed my newborn son in my arms, tiny fingers curling against my skin. For the first time, I felt both heartbreak and clarity. David had chosen absence. I would choose strength. The days after my surgery blurred together with exhaustion, pain, and the overwhelming new responsibility of caring for my son. David had stormed out of the hospital room, leaving me stunned but not surprised. His absence confirmed what I already knew. If I wanted to protect myself and my child, I had to build a life without depending on him. Fortunately, I was not alone. My support came from unexpected places, his mother, his sister, and my own friends. While David kept flooding my phone with contradictory messages, pleading, apologizing, accusing, I began focusing on recovery and setting the boundaries that would keep both me and my baby safe. Support from his family. David's sister moved into my house temporarily after I was discharged. She stocked the fridge with groceries, carried the baby upstairs when I was too sore to climb, and stayed in the guest room so she could help with night feedings. His mother also came often, handling laundry, cooking, and holding the baby so I could shower or rest. They never excused David's behavior. His mother, eyes filled with regret, admitted she was disgusted with her own son. She asked if she could remain part of her grandson's life, and I told her yes, David's choices wouldn't erase the bond I was willing to build with her. Their presence gave me something David never had: respect. And their willingness to step up reminded me that family isn't only about biology, but about action and care. David's attempts at reconciliation. Meanwhile, David's texts kept coming. At first, they alternated wildly. "I'm sorry, I'll do anything," followed by, "You're cruel for keeping my son away from me." The nurse advised me to put my phone on Do Not Disturb and answer only true emergencies. Then came his letters. The first was 3 pages, acknowledging the cruelty of calling my pregnancy, disgusting, admitting he'd failed as a partner, and expressing shame. I read it once, folded it, and placed it in a drawer. Words alone couldn't undo months of contempt. Later, his sister quietly mentioned that their mother had insisted he start therapy, even paying for the sessions herself. David, who had once mocked counseling, as for weak people, now attended twice a week. He also enrolled in a parenting course, bringing home certificates to prove his attendance. I wasn't impressed. Change had to be proven over time, not in neat documents. Still, I kept each letter, each receipt, filing them carefully. They weren't proof of redemption, they were evidence of whether he was serious or simply performing. My own healing. While David scrambled to prove change, I focused on my recovery. The C-section incision was slow to heal, and within 2 weeks, I developed a mild infection that required antibiotics. His mother drove me to urgent care while his sister stayed with the baby. Sitting in the waiting room, incision throbbing, I realized how fragile my health still was. Stress could slow recovery, and David had been my greatest source of stress. My doctor referred me to a postpartum therapist who specialized in trauma. At my first session, I sobbed through nearly the entire hour. I grieved not only the difficult pregnancy, but also the partnership I thought I had. The therapist validated my anger and sadness, helping me see that David's behavior wasn't just insensitive, it was emotional abuse. Protecting myself and my child wasn't cruelty, it was survival. I also met with a family lawyer. She helped me build a timeline. The humiliation at the baby shower, his dismissal of symptoms, my hospitalization alone, his absence at the birth. She explained how emotional abuse and abandonment could affect custody decisions. We organized texts and documents into a thick folder. For the first time, I felt armed with clarity, preparing for mediation. By the time I was 4 weeks postpartum, David requested mediation. I agreed, but only once I felt physically stable enough. Until then, I limited communication to logistics about the baby's medical needs, often passing messages through his sister or the lawyer. David surprised me at mediation. He arrived, thin, dark circles under his eyes, and for once quiet. When asked to listen to my account, he did not interrupt. I told the mediator how he had shamed me during the shower, called me disgusting, left me alone in the hospital. My voice shook, but I held firm. When his turn came, David apologized without excuses. He admitted selfishness, acknowledged cruelty, and described his ongoing therapy and parenting classes. He produced a notebook with notes, receipts, even book titles he was reading about pregnancy and trauma. He didn't beg for forgiveness, he asked for the chance to prove consistency. The mediator helped us draft a temporary plan. David could see our son twice a week at his mother's house under supervision. Each visit would last 1 hour, extending only if he completed his programs and showed stability. The first visits. The first time I handed over my son, my hands shook. I waited in my car down the street, checking my phone every 2 minutes for updates. His mother sent photos, David holding the baby correctly, supporting his head, looking at him with awe and fear. The baby slept peacefully in his arms. For the first time, I saw David not as the man who humiliated me, but as a father trying to connect, still, I did not let myself trust. Trust is earned, not given back. The next visits went smoothly, and eventually I drove home instead of waiting outside. After 3 weeks, David requested longer sessions, and I cautiously agreed to 2 hours. Always supervised, always documented. My growing strength. Through all of this, I began to feel stronger. The nights were still long, my body still healing, but my confidence as a mother grew. Every time I protected my boundaries, I modeled strength for my son. My therapist reminded me that resilience was part of parenting too. David continued his routine of therapy, parenting classes, and research. His sister showed me his notebooks filled with studies on preeclampsia C-sections and postpartum recovery. He even volunteered to speak at a local support group for expectant fathers, using his own failures as examples of what not to do. It was strange watching him work so hard on something he once mocked. But I never let myself forget consistency over time is the only true measure of change. Looking forward, by the end of those first months, life looked very different from what I had once imagined. I wasn't living the dream of equal partnership I had pictured during pregnancy. Instead, I was carving out a safer, healthier version of motherhood, one built on support from friends, family, and my own determination. David's role remained uncertain. He was making efforts, but I kept my boundaries firm. The mediation agreement, my lawyer's counsel, and my therapist's guidance all reminded me my first responsibility was to protect my child. And for the first time since the baby shower, I felt like I was succeeding. The mediation agreement marked a new chapter. For months, I had lived in a cycle of survival, healing from surgery, caring for my newborn, and bracing against David's unpredictable texts. Now, at least there was structure. David would see our son under supervision at his mother's house twice a week with every detail recorded. I no longer had to improvise boundaries, now they were written down, backed by law and a mediator. The first steps toward co-parenting. The first few supervised visits were nerve-wracking. Handing over my baby felt like tearing away a piece of myself. I sat in my car down the block, phone in hand, heart racing. Updates came through steadily, photos of David holding our son correctly, his mother watching carefully, the baby calm. To my surprise, David followed every rule. He showed up on time, brought diapers, asked questions, even took notes. He didn't push for more than the allotted hour, nor did he use the visits to plead with me. It was mechanical, almost too perfect, but it was also safe. Over the weeks, visits extended from 1 hour to 2, still supervised. David seemed determined to prove reliability through consistency. He never missed a session, and each time he looked both nervous and reverent as he held our son. Parallel lives. Meanwhile, my own life slowly stabilized. My therapist sessions helped me separate anger from responsibility. My lawyer reassured me that as long as David complied, custody arrangements would remain in my control. My body healed, my strength returned. David and I lived parallel lives, I as a single mother, supported by family and friends. He as a man trying to rebuild credibility. He began showing me certificates, proof of parenting classes, completed notes from therapy, even printed research about pregnancy trauma. Part of me remained skeptical. Was he performing change for appearances, or was this genuine? Still, I reminded myself my role was not to judge his heart, but to protect my son. The pediatrician's office. 2 months postpartum, the mediator asked if I'd allow David to attend a pediatrician appointment. I hesitated, but eventually I agreed under clear conditions he could listen, not decide. When we arrived, David stayed quiet in the corner chair, notebook in hand. He asked the doctor thoughtful questions about vaccines and milestones, took notes, and never contradicted me. The doctor, unaware of our history, commented that we seemed to be co-parenting well. I almost laughed at the irony, but I couldn't deny that David's behavior was different. Proof through actions. By the third month, David sent the mediator a request he wanted longer visits, still supervised but extended to half days. I reviewed his record. He had attended every visit, no late arrivals, no violations. Reluctantly, I agreed. During one visit, his mother sent me a photo. Our son asleep on David's chest, David's face softened in wonder. Seeing the image broke something inside me, not forgiveness, but a crack in the wall I'd built. David's mother later mentioned he had started volunteering at a pregnancy resource center, speaking to expectant fathers about supporting their partners. He used his failures as cautionary tales. She told me he cried in sessions when discussing my preeclampsia and how I could have died alone. For the first time, I saw signs not just of compliance, but of remorse. Building a new system. 4 months after this birth, David completed his 12-week parenting program. The instructor sent a letter praising his commitment, noting his perfect attendance and willingness to mentor other fathers. The letter stated plainly his remorse seemed genuine. In our custody meeting, David signed everything without argument. He agreed to me having primary custody with his visitation gradually expanding. He accepted therapy requirements and even volunteered to pay 20% above the calculated child support. He said he'd taken a weekend warehouse job to cover expenses, including a college fund. His actions spoke louder than his earlier words. For the first time, I felt cautiously optimistic, not about us as a couple, but about him as a father. Moments of change. At 4.5 months, something shifted. During a handoff, our son heard David's voice and turned toward him, arms outstretched. David's face crumpled as he held the baby close, overwhelmed. Watching them, my heart both broke and healed. Soon after David proposed, we use a co-parenting app. The app logged all communication schedules and expenses. It eliminated ambiguity, reducing conflict. To my surprise, David embraced it, fully updating notes about feedings, vaccinations, and milestones. He wasn't just showing up, he was studying our son's life. At 6 months, we attended a swimming class together on opposite sides of the pool. Our son laughed, splashing water, delighting everyone. For half an hour, we existed not as ex-partners, but as parents united in joy. Growth and reflection. David's therapist encouraged him to journal and share reflections. He began sending written summaries what he'd learned about emotional abuse, how his behavior had harmed me, what steps he was taking. Reading them was surreal. The man who once mocked me for discussing bodily changes was now dissecting his own cruelty. Still, my therapist reminded me, growth is his responsibility, not my reward. My focus remained on healing and providing a safe environment for my son. A new normal. By the time our son turned 6 months, life looked unrecognizable compared to that humiliating baby shower. I lived in an apartment decorated with photos of family and friends who had stood by me. My routines were steady, my confidence stronger. David, meanwhile, became consistent. He never missed visits, paid support on time, and continued therapy. His mother, once horrified by his behavior, grew proud of his progress. His sister, who had moved in to help me early on, told me she finally saw him becoming the man he should have been all along. But I never blurred the lines. David was not my partner. He was the co-parent of my child. That distinction mattered. It protected me. The final realization. One afternoon, after a custody review meeting, David looked at me and said quietly, "I know I destroyed us, but I won't destroy him. I'll spend the rest of my life proving I can be the father he deserves." For the first time, I believed him not as a partner, not as the man who once belittled me, but as a father slowly learning. And I realized something profound. The family I imagined no longer existed, but the one I had was still worth protecting. Not because of David, but because of the boundaries, support, and strength I had built. In the end, that was enough. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.